Bill Gates, Albert Bourla, the CEO of Peinture, and Mark Rutte, the current secretary of NATO, are accused of having planned and facilitated the deployment of a bioterrorist weapon, commonly known as the COVID vaccines, on the Dutch population. This is a real lawsuit, and it's probably the only one in the world to claim that the COVID crisis was not a public health issue, but a government project. And that resulted in massive human losses, which could eventually be described as a form of genocide. The case was filed in 2023 in the Netherlands by 7 citizens who claimed to have been injured by the vaccines, one of whom has died in the meantime. And in spite of incredible pressure, it's still going on. The next hearing will take place Monday, the 9th of March in Amsterdam, and it will be decisive as to whether expert witnesses will be allowed to testify. One of these experts is Sasha Latypova, and I have the great pleasure to interview her today for Essentiel News, a French online media based in Geneva, Switzerland. Hello, Sasha.
Hi, Senta. How are you?
Yeah, fine. It's really an honor to have you, and thank you so much for taking the time to answer the questions for our French public.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Sasha, I think many French viewers may not be familiar with your work. So before delving into this lawsuit, could you please explain more concretely what expertise you have that makes your opinion relevant as a witness in this case, whether you're...
Currently, I don't work in the pharmaceutical industry anymore, but I spent about 25 years working in pharma, in R&D, in various roles, capacities across different therapeutic areas, focusing on drugs. I never worked in vaccines, but my specialty in the last few years was focusing on cardiovascular safety assessments and working with FDA and global regulators. So I'm very familiar with how drugs are supposed to be regulated, both in the US and globally. Also, I've assembled a fairly large body of expertise now. Well, I started looking into the COVID situation. I had no idea what was going on, but I thought there was maybe governments were freaking out and just panicking unnecessarily, and the disease itself didn't seem to be very dangerous. It was like flu. And so I was like, well, I didn't pay attention. But when they started pushing the mRNA as a vaccination method, then my hair stood up. I was like, you kidding me? Because it's I knew that this was a very dangerous class of drug, gene therapy, and very, very risky and toxic, but lots of known toxicities. And so I just, at that point, I thought something really bad is going on, and I started looking into it myself. And so since about 2021, I've assembled a fairly large body of evidence of what's going on, and was publishing it and speaking and being on different podcasts. So the legal team knew about me, and they reached out and they invited me to provide an expert witness testimony, again, dealing with the regulations, violations of the regulations, legal frameworks that are being applied here, and adding my expertise.
So what would you say are, the elements, you already gave an introduction to that, but the specific elements that you would you would qualify these injections as really bioterrorist weapons?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's part of my expertise that we already written up. Myself and Catherine Watt, we were able to introduce our written testimony already into the court record, although this was for the purposes of this appeal that going to happen on March 9th. But still, it's already been introduced and we've written it up. And my expertise essentially boils down to, it's about 60 pages of written expertise plus about 200 megabytes of attachments of source documents. And so my expertise boils down to the fact that these injections, as they're delivered and administered to people, are indistinguishable from weapons. Because, the poisoning is an age-old method, and the most effective poisoning is by injection. The poison darts have been used for thousands of years. And so that's not like any rocket science here. But the distinction between the medicine and the poison is frequently in those ingredients, type of application, use. And so when you look at this whole, how these products are both under which legal frameworks they're purchased, how they're manufactured, how they're distributed, and how they're administered with lies, it qualifies as indistinguishable from poison in use, meaning a weapon. And that's kind of the conclusion of my expertise now. As you said, this is a civil procedure, so we're not prosecuting things like crimes against humanity or some sort of a criminal case. This is right now a civil case, and eventually we hope that there will be a criminal referral and there will be a referral to crimes against humanity courts. And so, my conclusion is these are indistinguishable from weapons, but the court can determine whether this falls into definitions of genocide, democide, and so forth.
So you said you already were able to submit a written testimony before, because it was not clear whether you'd be able to testify or not, if I understand.
Yeah, we're still, asking the court to allow us to do that. So we're still in the preliminary stages, but as one of the, so the hearing, I gotta step back. So in the Dutch law, there is a procedure available to all citizens, which is a consultation with the judge and on the complex cases. And so that's when we were invited, several experts invited to participate, and the attorneys wanted to utilize this procedure to first bring us into the court. And that was in the lower court. So I was told you can't really lose this process because it's kind of a constitutional right in Holland, or Netherlands rather. And so, but we lost it in the lower court. The judge said, no, you cannot do that. For a variety of reasons. At that time, it was also like they didn't allow any press in the court, even though it's supposed to be a public hearing. They did all sorts of things at the time. And as a part of an appeal, Peter asked us to submit written statements, so we did. And so he's submitting it as part of the appeal of that denial of the lower court. And so it's not being heard yet on the merits, because the case is not being heard yet on the merits, but he has been using this material already to say, why we should not be denied this process. The plaintiffs can bring the experts into the room.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, because everybody has a different legal system, and we also had questions. But anyway, I mean, this is really fantastic that this kind, at least this kind of expertise can be can be put out in the open.
And I published it also, and Catherine published hers. Yes. So it's on my Substack. And Catherine's testimony deals with law and history of law around these types of vaccines and emergencies and so forth. So her testimony is a very detailed discussion of the relevant law, and mine is very detailed discussion of relevant regulations and evidence of how everything was completely, violated, and how people were lied to essentially about these products.
Absolutely, and we will, we will follow up. We will be there. We will translate the materials. We already dubbed a few, Catherine Austin Fitz, testimony. So I think this is very important. I just would like to come back on what you said earlier, because people, from a bioterrorist design perspective, it makes more sense to use a vaccine as a vehicle, let's say, for a bioweapon, than simply try to release a pathogen into the wild. Okay, say you're able to make something potent, you couldn't control it, and it would perhaps backfire. Yet it seems that people are not really able to conceive that a vaccine can be a bioweapon, while it seems to be like the easiest and most obvious, the most controllable vehicle. So what is there any, what's the reaction today in that respect? Do you see any change, or people kind of get into this idea, or?
Well, slowly. I mean, I can't really tell. It seems that the narrative is slowly changing toward, acceptance that this could be the case. But yeah, but the problem is that the general public is brainwashed and programmed with propaganda about bioweapons being these lab-made viruses that are released, and then think back about the movies, the Contagion, the Outbreak was the earlier one. Many shows, different shows on Netflix, everywhere. I'm sure in France as well. They constantly are propagandizing this. These like rogue scientists in the lab will make this virus and release it. But this is a false idea. It never actually worked. So I also, as part of my research, I reviewed all the publicly available declassified materials about U.S. official bioweapons program development. So in the U.S. and several other countries, there were official military bioweapons development programs starting around the 1940s and continuing to 1969, when Nixon banned it. So there was a bioweapons convention, which is very toothless convention. And Nixon banned it by transferring all of this into the academic research, infectious disease research, calling it all infectious disease research. But from what I've seen, the Army tried to do, nothing worked. The only thing that they could accomplish in around 30 years of attempting this was growing bacteria in large quantities. And like anthrax, so they were growing anthrax in a tank of 10,000 liters, or I forget, it was huge. It was like a building was a tank where they were growing anthrax. And then some other bacteria they could grow in large quantities. But even that, anthrax is probably the most stable. That's why they're growing it in such quantities. Everything else is kind of fragile. And so they could grow bacteria. They would put them in some kind of a distribution delivery vehicle, like a bomb or a sprayer or something, and nothing would happen. It didn't work. Nothing would spread at all. So they figured, okay, this is not effective, and fear mongering is far more effective, right? So now everybody believes that they have achieved it, but they didn't. They just decided, well, we're gonna put it all into the infectious disease research and vaccines, and then Hollywood will make a whole bunch of propaganda for us, and this is mission accomplished now. So everyone believes this nonsense. But I'm telling you, yeah, you can't build a virus in a lab and open the door and it will spread. That cannot happen. You need to deliver chemicals, so they can deploy chemical weapons that are skirting the chemical weapon prohibition, and with that, which is very easy. There's a lot of different compounds, legal compounds, such as pesticides used in other chemicals that are used in agriculture, perfectly legal. You can just spray metals. For example, I've been telling people, if they aerosolize and spray metals somewhere nearby and you inhale them, you're going to have a flu. There's a known effect, welder's flu. It's called welder's flu. It's in welding. If you're work in welding, it's an occupational hazard. You can inhale the metal and get a flu, but there is no virus. So I'm telling you, like, there's simple things that they can deploy to simulate and to create some slight increase in abnormal flu in particular season, and then create a whole bunch of propaganda and start different rumors. Oh, was it a monkey? Was it a bioweapon in the Wuhan lab? Oh my God. So that is very effective, but people don't realize that this doesn't work. The only method that really does work is vaccinations. And so those are the bioweapons, not the flying viruses.
Thank you very much for this very important explanation. I interviewed a Belgian professor called, but he lives in the United States, called Martin Zizi. I don't know if you know him. And he worked as he was very high in defense, and he worked as an expert for the UN Bioterrorist Weapons Commission. Went to Iraq to investigate, the chemical bioweapons, etc. And he explained to me exactly the same thing.
Oh, okay, good. See, I'm not crazy.
So you should, it could be interesting to have his, additional, to add to your your explanation. Yes, absolutely, to your opinion. Okay, well, if I'm correct, you have also looked into the quality of various vaccine lots, as well as manufacturing issues. And there seem to be default into quality control. Can you give us some more information on this? And might this facilitate the targeting of specific population?
Yeah, so that was my first research that I did, was in the vaccine lot variability. So when they pushed these products on the market, immediately people started reporting very large numbers of adverse events and deaths. I saw, I walked into a grocery store. We have pharmacy in the grocery store. At that time, around 21, I walked into a grocery store, and there's this young man lying on the floor next to the pharmacy, and everyone behaves like this is no big deal. I was shocked, and he's lying, and his vaccination card next to him, and I literally was shocked. I've never seen anything like this, and everybody's just like, "Oh, he'll okay. He just passed out. It would just give him time."
This is terrible.
Yeah. So this was, as so common that I actually walked in on one. My husband also told me that he went to his doctors and they started pushing this shot on him, and he said, "Well, you guys we're both from pharma industry," and he said, "You have anaphylaxis with this?" They said, "Oh yeah, 3 yesterday," and he was like, "I'm not taking that shot." And so anaphylaxis is like this, this person passed out and they were reporting 3 in one day. It's extremely rare. And to see 3 in one day with the same injection, in the previous times, all of this would be stopped. There would be a recall of the product immediately. If you think about it, if we have a salmonella in salad somewhere, all grocery that distributes it, all the stores are pulling it off the shelves immediately. The same thing with the medical products. If you have 3 anaphylactic shocks in one day from the same place, they're supposed to report it, and the manufacturer immediately supposed to initiate some sort of corrective action, like figuring out immediate recall and then figure out what happened, what's going on. None of this happened ever. So to date, none of the recalls happened. No investigation of adverse events happened properly. Also, if the manufacturer is not doing it, the FDA or EMA, they have enforcement power to recall the product, to stop the product, to punish the manufacturer. They have lots and lots of power, including in the US. The FDA can bring in sort of paramilitary forces and destroy products at the farm, destroy products at the manufacturing facility. And they have done it in case of, oh my God, a farmer is selling raw milk. We got to bring the crew and burn it all down. They've done it. But here, they're, oh my God, we're powerless. We just don't know. And this has been going on for now 5 years, 6 years, right? But my first research showed that not only there was a lot of these events, the variability between batches was gigantic. It was orders of magnitude greater than we've seen with anything. And I compared as a baseline, I took all the flu shot data, which is also not safe. But at least I was like, okay, I need some baseline. And so I downloaded all the flu shot data for 30 years and compared variability of those lots, which were produced by dozens of different manufacturers. And, so I compared variability of those lots with respect of how many deaths and adverse events they're causing with the COVID shots. And you can't even graph them on the same graph. You need like logarithmic scale because it just drowns, the flu data becomes a tiny, tiny little line on the bottom. And all of these lots are varying like crazy with thousands and thousands of adverse events, hundreds of deaths. And so to me, that analysis, I conducted it for about, 18 months or so. And it confirmed that these products are not compliant with good manufacturing practices. All the laws that regulate consistency, quality, lot to lot, dose to dose of all drugs and all medical products and all food, all mass-produced consumer food also. So, and that's a gigantic violation, as I said. And then I for the longest time after that, I couldn't realize how everyone was getting away with it. But at least I determined by then with this analysis that this product was not compliant even remotely with anything, with any regulations for drugs.
And how would you explain the variability? I mean, this variability between lots?
We still don't know. It's impossible to assess because obviously all those doses are now gone and injected into people. We try to determine some sort of trends, but they're not very like clear-cut trends. And we also don't have, in the VAERS data set, there is not enough granularity. So you can, for example, get to the state, the data will be reported by state, but you can't get to the county level, for example. And there could be many changes made. Also, later on, when I found out how it's produced and manufactured, literally anything can be put into it because it's first of all, it's produced by military-controlled assets. Some ingredients actually come from the manufacturing facilities that are owned by the CIA and Fort Detrick, which is a bioweapons lab in the United States. And so they're government-owned. They are delivered through the military distribution, not civilian pharmacy distribution, like parts of the supply chain. And so they can introduce anything at any time in any lot. There's also a lot of sloppiness and inability to produce this product in large quantities. And they started increasing the scale of these lots, in gigantic amounts. And the problem with this is biomanufacturing by itself is very complex and full of, it's like hundreds of steps, hundreds of different components. It's all chemicals. They try to build together very large chemicals, which are these mRNA strings, let's say, put it this way. And but they're unstable and they break apart. And so it's combination of this is a very sloppy process. It wasn't fine-tuned. It may work in small quantities, but they started putting out lots of like 300 liters. And even in the manufacturing documents that I have reviewed, they were writing that, Pfizer was writing that at 37 liters, they already have a failure of the chemical reaction. And that's a known effect. So you can make something work in a small quantity. And when you increase the quantity of all your reagents and your process, it doesn't work the same way anymore. It does because it doesn't react the same way. It's just based on the volume. And they went from like micrograms to 30 liters, where they started having this problem, and then they started pumping out 300-liter and more productions. And the question is, okay, well, what is done? It's just going to create all sorts of variability because it's just the process fell apart. But they didn't care. And again, under these frameworks, they don't care how of the quality. They just need to pump out lots and lots and lots of vials and inject lots and lots of people, and then it's like a Russian roulette. Well, you either get something very, very toxic, or you get something diluted where reaction failed and they just filled it into the vials and shipped it.
Yeah, well, it's frightening. That's yeah, absolutely. I don't know, but I think in Europe, in the vaccine approval documents filed for the EMA, if I'm correct, some ingredients were secrets, meaning they were a proprietary blend, patented substance. And so they were just not disclosed to the EMA approval committee. So can you confirm this? Was this the same in the United States? And how is this?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same in the United States. They are a lot of ingredients are not disclosed at all. Like these for Pfizer, for example, there are ALC. There are two compounds called ALC, some numbers, and nobody knows what it is and how it's synthesized and what goes into making it. And it's so, and on the technical sheets, a lot of ingredients that are or used or part of it, they're not for human use. They're considered toxic. So, which is not necessarily, you could have an ingredient that is determined toxic, but if it may be a raw material for something, and so then it gets transformed into something else. But in any case, so there are these concerns. They never disclosed what those ingredients are. They never disclosed a lot of things about their manufacturing. So when I reviewed the documentation that was submitted to EMA, that was the first manufacturing review. They were saying, we're doing rolling reviews. So whatever you have right now, send it to us and we'll review it. So it's like the file is never complete. And the regulatory review must be done on a total complete description of the process, validation of every step, validation of the that you've removed all the contaminants. Well, how do you, and all the characterization of how do you characterize the final product? How do you know that there is 20 micrograms of this mRNA? And how do you know that there's, and none of those were fully described. What they submitted first to the FDA, Pfizer did, was so about 100 pages. I'm trying to remember exactly. So there are a bunch of these versions became available as a data leak from EMA, and let's say they sent 100-page document in the middle of November 2020 to the FDA for the first time for the reviewers to go through it. And as I said, the process is extremely complex, and hasn't been even fully defined before. So there are no standards. So everything is kind of custom and unique and newly invented. And so the reviewers now have less than a week to figure out if it. And so I read the comments that the reviewers put there, and they're saying this is missing. There's we can't determine this. We don't know how this is done. Lots and lots of different questions. And so they put out several objections at that time. So at the end of November, and to EMA saying, well, Pfizer is not good manufacturing practice compliant. So EMA determined at least that they're not good manufacturing practice compliant. And they also had a very serious concern with, as I said, mRNA molecule is large. They try to glue it together from various components, but it immediately starts falling apart. And that's what reviewers identified. They said there's this breakage of mRNA, and we don't know, it's unpredictable. It's like if you break a pane of glass, it It's unpredictable. You will have large pieces and then small pieces and some shards. And that's exactly how mRNA breaks, also in an unpredictable way. And that's what they were saying. So what does it mean for safety and efficacy? If you are saying our 3,000 base pair codes for spike protein of Wuhan version, so that's very specific. And then instead of that 3,000 base pairs, we have 1,500 base pairs floating here and 250 here, and maybe 4,000 there because something got like stuck together. So that's what they were finding, and that was their objection too. But then all those very serious objections. By the way, none of this would happen in a normal approval. If reviewers are saying you're not good manufacturing practice compliant, and we have the very serious concerns with your active ingredient, with its stability, that's it, you're stopped, you're not going anywhere. But somehow miraculously, 2 weeks later, this product is pushed globally on all markets, right? So all of this is disregarded. That's the situation, and that's part of my testimony also.
Coming back to the lawsuit, then, with what you just explained, so one cannot, some people might still argue negligence due to the emergency. Like, what are, according to you, the indications that there was a real planning, designed beforehand by the people, the defendants and the people now accused?
Mm-hmm. Well, so, I mean, of course, there are the most recent revelations that came out from the Epstein files, but those are not part of our testimony because they just came up with them. But they are kind of a gift because they confirm the premeditation, the planning, the fact that COVID wasn't any public health event, but it was a government project. Government, deep state, Epstein, JP Morgan, Bill Gates, getting together and deciding to run pandemics for profit, right? So these pandemics for profit, but we were showing different other pieces of evidence pointing to the same thing, that this was a pandemic for profit, a government project, designed a long time ago. And the most important evidence is changes of the law, because the lawmaking is a series of intentional acts. And if all these intentional acts by all these various legislators lead in the same direction, meaning, so in the US, it all culminated in emergency framework, which I describe frequently. This emergency framework consists of the following things. An announcement based on opinion of a single government bureaucrat, which is head of HHS, Health and Human Services, or health minister. So it's a non-elected, appointed bureaucrat says, I believe there is a pandemic. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's the only thing that's necessary for announcing a pandemic. And at WHO level, it's the same thing. So Tedros can say, I believe there is a pandemic, and we have a pandemic. It doesn't require any data. It doesn't require any illness to exist, any deaths, anything. And when these announcements were made in the US and globally, in the US, the date is February 4th, 2020. At that time, there was nothing going on. There was maybe 500 PCR cases worldwide, or, well, not worldwide, in the US maybe. But there were no deaths. So there was nothing absolutely going on. They just made an announcement. And once that announcement is made, it's called Declaration of Emergency for COVID, let's say. But it goes under, we have this piece of law, PrEP Act, which is very important in the US. It doesn't exist in Europe, but in Europe, they made it kind of synthetic from different other parts of regulations. But in the US, so once this declaration is issued, it's called the Emergency Declaration under PrEP Act. Then under this framework, the government can use countermeasures, and these countermeasures are not deemed medical uses or medical products. And then they can also lie to people about what these products contain. and their health effects and so forth. And so that's what they did. And so now the PrEP Act was put on the books in 2005. So 20 years or let's say 15 years before they started using it, but 20 years ago. And at that time, so we also found congressional debate about this law. So the way they did it, they introduced it into a multi-thousand-page bill, which was appropriations of money for Hurricane Katrina relief. And they do it typically to hold the entire Congress hostage so that opposing party cannot vote no. At the time, the majority was Republicans, and they snuck this bill in to this appropriation in the middle of the night, on the weekend, on Christmas of 2005. Right? Also common tactic. At that time, though, the Democrats were opposing party, and several senators spoke against it. So they organized themselves quickly. They got a constitutional scholar, Edwin Chmerinsky, write them analysis of this bill, PrEP Act, and then Senators Joe Biden, he was the senator at the time, Hillary Clinton, who was the senator at the time, Richard Byrd, and Ted Kennedy spoke against this PrEP Act bill. And they said absolutely wonderful things, which I completely agree with, 100%. They said it's unconstitutional because it is unconstitutional. It violates our rights to sue in regular courts, in the regular judicial system, for death, injury, destruction of property caused by the government actions. So that's completely removed now. So we've been stripped of that right in 2005. At that time, Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton were very much opposed to doing that. As I said, so because, and also this law was then, they justified it on the books by saying, what if we get attacked by a bioweapon or a chemical weapon? And so it's designed for very severe situations such as war or bioterrorism, and it goes under what's called chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear weapons framework, or CBRN framework. And only under those scenarios, they're saying, at the time when, the passage of this bill, they were saying, if we get attacked by a bioweapon or a nuclear weapon, it's a very dire situation. We need immediate access, distribution of variety of medical products, and they may be still experimental. And we just need, especially for the first responders, we need all the, vaccines, therapeutics, everything very quickly. And we can't have this, liability hanging over the manufacturer's heads, because then they won't be supplying them. They will be afraid to give us this new product. And so that's how the bill was passed. But then, of course, what do they do? They turn around immediately, start using it. Well, as we see now from Epstein exchange with Bill Gates, and JP Morgan, is that they're saying, oh, okay, well, this piece of law now, we can design this whole activity, this charitable fund, which is, for profit really, but we're going to hide it as a charitable fund, to now fund this as a sure thing. Right, so we can now pump money into this pandemic preparedness, and of course, as I said, it's not possible to have pandemics, and it's not possible to have viruses released from labs. So what do? Well, ultimately, they decide we'll just go into simulate it, and then they started all these practice simulation events, Event 201, and so forth. And so we're just going to simulate it, and then we're going to, print a lot of money and send it to our now set up this whole network where we're manufacturing these vaccines. And then, of course, Bill Gates was bragging that he made like 20x on this investment into these.
Every dollar invested brings you $20 in profit.
Yeah, it returns $20 because, of course, they knew exactly which horses to bet on, because those were the horses they were running.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting, the fact that, there's testimonies from different angles, perspective. I know that Catherine Austin Fitz, for example, she will explain that the economics were already decided. They say the going down reset was already decided in August, so 6 months before the pandemic was declared. And indeed, we see that, I think it's end of January, should check it, but at the European level, so before there was even the really emergency from the WHO declared, I think it was in March, they already started to unblock the pandemic bonds at the European level, because then it liberated the option to invest into, I think, 400 million euros the EU next generation level. I mean, it's amazing how much money they were able to raise.
In the US, the first funding tranche to the vaccines went in to Operation Warp Speed. About $50 billion were distributed by May of 2020.
Yes.
By the DoD to the vaccine manufacturers. And of course, so they organize, they've written the law to allow them to commit the crimes legally. So like they've written this PrEP Act law and all the related laws that they are utilizing here to say, when we say it's a pandemic, we can suspend the Constitution, strip you of your rights. Now we can also immediately appropriate all this through the military spending, huge amounts of money, and put it into our companies that we already set up for this. And then when you get killed and injured, you have no rights.
Exactly.
And we also can lie to you about the severity of anything related to this. It's written into the PrEP Act law that it's okay to lie about it. So any covered person who is acting on this project, by the way, also under PrEP Act, everyone who is participating in the COVID response and following HHS orders is deemed a government employee, regardless of their place of work. And so the government gives them sovereign immunity shield. So they're now, for purposes of this project, they're government employees. So, and then people are telling us, well, no, it's bad pharma overreach. How is it bad pharma overreach? The government tells you they're our employees when they're carrying this vial to you.
Yes.
So it's a government project. No, it's not a pharma running around and doing it by themselves.
Do you know whether that's a bit different and there would be an angle in Europe? And if the legislation in Holland, for example, would be different, regarding this specific aspect.
Yeah, well, so the good news that there is no PrEP Act in Europe. So we had a huge amount of problems. So in the US, PrEP Act prevented pretty much all litigation, and there was thousands of cases. And I've also written a review of case law that accumulated, and it's very clear that PrEP Act has served as just an iron wall, to protect all this criminal cartel. But in Europe, there's no PrEP Act. In Europe, what they've done, I've also written about it, I call it synthetic PrEP Act. There are some laws in the EU that are similar to the US in the sense of if there is a declared health emergency, then they over time relaxed a bunch of provisions for, you can suspend, you can waive some aspects of good manufacturing practice compliance, for example. You can waive this and that, so they got that framework. So if there is an emergency declared, then they have a bunch of flexibility to waive stuff. I'm not aware anywhere of the law that says that the government can lie to the people. So that's one of the aspects of the of the litigation that we're pursuing, that yes, the government officials who are defendants, there's about 10 or I forget how many total, but most of the defendants are government officials in the Netherlands, and then Albert Bourla and Bill Gates. And so we're saying, well, you guys all lied to Dutch citizens who got injured because of that. So that's a positive. And then now other aspects were contract related. So the part that forced all the governments to suspend import-export law, again, also the distribution, pharmacy distribution laws, the liability, and provide indemnification to Pfizer and Moderna. It was done through contracts that were negotiated, remember, by Ursula von der Leyen, by text with Albert Bourla. There's also some communications as part of the leaked materials from EMAs. There are some emails showing that he was bullying and the FDA and pushing them to Albert Bourla and pushing them to approve faster, even before anybody has seen the data. So he was writing emails to Peter Marks, and also at the same time lying to the EMA reviewers. So he was telling the FDA, or I forget exactly, but he was telling the FDA that EMA wants it faster, or vice versa, was telling the EMA that FDA wants it faster. And then there's an email exchange where these guys realized what's going on and said, oh, he's lying.
Okay. Wow. Amazing.
So,
yes. Exactly.
But yeah, so that's kind of the positive, is the absence of the PrEP Act and the fact that they don't. So in the US, we still are under PrEP Act declaration of emergency for COVID, and nobody knows this. It's being suppressed. It's even on ChatGPT, or if you do a search on the internet, it will lie to you about this. But we currently have PrEP Act declaration extended to the end of 2029. And in Europe, as I said, there is no such declaration. So we're hoping that we can have a discussion in court about monstrosity of everything that I just discussed, and that really those officials and the defendants alike conspired to hurt these people.
Absolutely. I have a question for those, those cases who seem to have had, very early knowledge of the whole thing. One of them is Ugur Shahin. He, if I understand correctly, he was the original designer of the COVID vaccine. So the Pfizer vaccine being designed in Germany with a company named BioNTech, and he would have done this like in one day time, I think. And I've heard that, I read an article, but it's some time ago. It's just now comes up to my mind now we're having this discussion. But I think it's in the Brownstone Institute publications, and it's worth looking into. That they actually cheated on the declaration of when they started to go into the clinical phase trials of the vaccine, and that was actually earlier. And if I understand, it was the next day after the declaration. They were already starting, getting an approval of the Paul Ehrlich Institute, who was the German sort of FDA, that supervises the clinical, gives authorization for the clinical trials. So are this kind of people also mentioned in the lawsuit, or could they be subpoenaed? Do you know any?
I don't know about that, but yeah, we know we know about BioNTech, and so
being European as well, it could be another, since there is no PrEP Act, etc. It could be.
So I mean, I don't know. So I'm not prosecuting the case, and frankly, the problem we're having is it's extremely expensive to prosecute cases like this. So we're doing everything for free. All the experts are doing everything for free, and I'm frequently told in the US that we can't take it on a case like this. It will cost us $5-6 million to prosecute, which is correct, because this is how expensive it is.
What's the amount like in euros that you have heard of? Do you have any clue at the moment?
For this case?
Yes, in euros.
I actually don't know, but there is very little. So there is, so as I said, the experts are working for free. we're down to one attorney. He is taking minimum payment. Actually, by law, they're not allowed to work pro bono in the Netherlands. I didn't know that. So in the US, a lot of the times attorneys will take cases pro bono based on ultimate settlements or awards and so forth, and they will risk capital, but they still have to raise money somehow. So that was my discussions with the US attorneys who are knowledgeable about cases like this, and they said, yeah, well, we can work pro bono, we can maybe find volunteers also, but we still need to fundraise several $1 million to actually do all this prosecution, all the work, all the trial preparation, everything that you have to do. So somehow we still need to fundraise for this. And in the Netherlands, the lawyers are not allowed to work for pro bono. So the lead attorney is taking, like the minimum that he can get by. And there's a foundation that, I asked people, please donate, Recht, Oprecht. It's linked on the YouTube. We have a page. But as far as I know, it's not a lot of money that they raised. And I said that all of us experts are working for free. I'm paying my own money to go to the Netherlands. I'm giving assistance to a couple of other journalists who are traveling from a long distance away. And, so I'm doing all I can to help out. But yeah, it's a very difficult situation. And if you want, more defendants, well, you need more money.
Okay, so well, anyway, we will surely, add, all the links. I think you have those for people can support you personally. I think through perhaps on your Substack letter, where can people support you, first of all?
So my Substack, you can subscribe to my Substack. I also have a coffee. You can just send donations. Buy me a coffee. It's kind of like a donation page, and so people can do that. People can buy my art.
Yes, it's wonderful. I really love it.
Yeah, so like that helps too. And so that's how I've been funding my work. Yes. And so I'll send you the links if you can put out.
Yes, we will include them, and also Recht, Oprecht.
And Recht, Oprecht, yeah. So Fondation, which has that one you can donate in euros.
Yes, that's easier for them. Okay, is there anything you would like to add? What do you expect now next, Monday, 9th of March? What do you expect is going to happen? What are your hopes for
so that people understand, on March 9th, it's a appeals hearing for, as I said, for that procedure, for that first preliminary procedure of consultation with the judge, bringing the experts that the plaintiffs want to bring. And that's it. So I'm going to be there in person. Catherine Austin-Fitz is going in person, and Joe Sanson. So 3 out of 5 experts are going to be in court in person. A bunch of journalists are also coming there in person. Now, we are not expected to speak, or we're available for the judge if he has questions. We're primarily there supporting attorney Peter Stassen, because we're going to have multiple breaks, and we can have a consultation room so we can talk to him about what's going on and give additional advice. For now, it's expected that only Peter speaks on behalf of plaintiffs, but the judge may have questions, or there may be some other situation where we need to speak as well. But we will be there just to show that yes, we're available. We're supporting this case. We're real people with real expertise, and we're willing to come all the way in person to the court. It was our idea to come and just show in court.
Thank you so much for doing that, for being there. If there's going to be like some public support or crowd, or you think so? I don't know.
Well, we hope, as I said, we've reached out to a lot of journalists. We're expecting, several, we're expecting a group of journalists to be there. There's definitely going to be the press conference afterwards. The court also said that there will be a live stream, although I don't know if it's going to be a public live stream, or they were making a Zoom available for other experts who can't be there in person. So I'm not sure about that yet. But if there is
I think it's not going to be public, just for the people in the next.
Oh, it's just for the people in the room. So anyway, but there will be a press conference after, and so that obviously we're expecting a bunch of journalists with cameras, with interviews and discussion, and of course that can be all publicized.
We will be there. We will we will film. So follow us all. And we will translate this interview, of course, in French, and then publish also a full article just before the event, so people, know about it. We can publicize the whole thing about the hearing, and then we'll be here in Amsterdam, and I hope, certainly speak to you again. Thank you so much, Sasha. You're really fantastic. I'm a big fan of yours.
Thank you.
I hope everybody here will be as well. If you appreciate this interview, so you can support Sasha, you can support Recht Oprecht. You can also follow us essential.news website or on YouTube channel. It's mainly in French, but we have a couple of interviews in English. We have a weekly newsletter. And it's all for free also. So we thank everyone who would like to make a donation, since we haven't rounded our 2026 budget yet. And the team is expanding. Again, thank you so much, Sasha, and
thank you,
viewers, and see you all in Amsterdam. Thank you.
See you in Amsterdam.